Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. I guess this is kind of a part two to yesterday's episode about Armageddon, but this is more about the personal aspect of passing away. Yesterday we kind of used psychological means to justify it, but that more works in the minds of people who are already relatively healthy. And we didn't really look at the personal experience of passing to the other side of the void. It's very interesting. You see, the human body is a magnificent machine. Yes, not everybody has the same parts working at the same time, and there are indeed those of us born with, I don't want to call them defective machines, but machines that didn't come out perfectly. Just as any other manufacturing process, sometimes you get ones that don't fit the mold. Not that it's better, not that it's worse, it's just it's not manufactured the same way. Anyways, irrelevant to the topic. But machines, as they are, eventually break down, and we're biological machines. We follow the basic rules of mechanics and physics. Our tendons are a lot like the throttle in a car. To pull your finger back, it's your tendon pulling it, just like, well, I don't know now with the electronic cars, but in the old days there'd be a wire between your gas pedal and the throttle. Press down on it, it would pull back and make it go faster. The same systems, the same mechanical principles apply to both. That's why we discover more about the human body, we discover more about machines, we discover how they work the same way. When your time comes, and hopefully you're lying somewhere comfortable surrounded by a lot of friends, because, being alone is terrifying. Not that it's any less terrifying with people around you, but we're looking at a machine that is starting to shut down. People who are in their last days tend not to be very hungry. And that's because the machine no longer has the energy to spare to break food down. Breaking food down is very energy intensive. Think about it. You take one of Gordon Ramsay's dishes, a beautiful steak and whatever's on the side of it. Cut it up to bite-sized pieces. First of all, cutting it up requires energy. You can go caveman and shove it in your mouth, but you're still expending some energy. Chewing it, because that's the first part of digestion, the mouth, chewing it and saliva also takes up energy, because you want to grind it down into portions that you can squeeze down your throat. Going down your throat through your esophagus costs energy, and we dump it into this acid pit known as the stomach. Well, generating the acid, generating the stomach lining and everything around it costs, you got it, energy. And the stomach isn't even the final place for digestion. It still has to go through the intestines, which costs, you know what I'm going to say. And finally, excreting it. Do you know what I found out? Apparently, a lot of heart attacks come from people forcing themselves to excrete too hard. This is something they've only just discovered. I only read one source on it, but I find it fascinating, and we've all been in that situation where we just want that part out of us. Well, when your body, the machine that it is, realizes it's running out of energy reserves, it says, okay, we have fat reserves, we have skin cells, we have brain cells, we have all this we can cannibalize for energy. There's no need to eat a bowl of rice. I'll just shut down until I can get everything working again. Because your body, again, it's a self regulating machine and it tries to repair itself. This is something we're trying to do with our robots currently. It's a lot more difficult than science fiction would lead us to believe. But at the same token, your body has already evolved over billions of years to do the exact same thing. That's why people who are on the doorstep to the beyond tend to do a lot of sleeping. Because sleeping saves energy. Your brain is the most energy inefficient organ in your entire body. It's You look at a heat scan, an infrared image of a person, you're going to see the head heats up a lot. You know the old saying, you lose 70% of your body heat through your head? It's true, because your body and your brain are burning so much energy. So to keep you conscious and all the parts of your brain going at 100%, it's better to shut down to sleep mode where everything is still working, but just at a lower power rate. So people go unconscious, they go into comas. It's the body's way of protecting itself and giving it more time to heal itself. The case of a coma, it's trying to figure out how to repair itself. In the case that you're going to be pushing up daisies soon, it's trying to figure out how to repair itself and running out of time, which is why people start to get a little bit less than lucid. I've been around a few people that have passed away in front of my eyes, and I remember my grandmother. She was my father and I. We were with her, and we were in a hospital room with a fairly decent window on it, but it looked out onto a courtyard, and it was a chilly day. I forget whether it was spring or fall, but chilly enough that nobody would be outside. But she described this scene. It was of children playing. The day was beautiful. The sea was outside. Now, none of this was happening. But in her perception, it was. It was like a waking dream. She was conscious, but she wasn't really quite there with us. And there's sometimes I envy that. Not because of what was going to happen to her, but simply because it was showing her a scene that I can't describe the smile that was on her face. She was a smiling woman generally. Both my grandmothers were just wonderful, big hearts, lovely people. But she was so happy to tell us what was going outside, and I was jealous that I couldn't tune into that world, even for just a minute. That was a good week or so before she passed on. So your brain is shutting itself down, and that's why people say that they see an oncoming darkness when they have near-death experiences. Yeah, there's a real scientific explanation for that, because your brain is shutting itself down. Now, does this mean there's no afterlife? Heck no. I would never argue with somebody's belief in the supernatural. Well, maybe I would, depending on what it is. I'm not fond of tarot card readers. Numerologists have my scorn. But if somebody wants to tell me about angels and unicorns and stuff like that, go right ahead. I got nothing but time for you. But that's when we start to switch from the physical to the metaphysical. We can no longer measure it. We can no longer study it. We can no longer meaningfully communicate with it. And this is where the division between life and unlife happens. It's an arbitrary division because, you see on the dramas about them performing chest compressions, hooking them up to the machine, clear, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, real life doesn't work that way. The machines, I can't remember the name of those machines that they put on with the pads. They can restore a heart that has a bad rhythm, but they can't start one that doesn't have a rhythm. Or maybe the hospitals have better machines. Technology is always advancing. And that's why it's so hard to say when life terminates, because we don't have a clue. We know when they're going to give up, but we don't know when the person passes over. Now, all this is not meant to depress you, my dear listener. It's just meant to give you that perspective of what's going on in your body. Maybe this all got triggered because of a disease. Maybe it was a cancer. Maybe your heart had trouble. Maybe your liver had trouble. There's so many things in the human body that can go wrong and start the process. I wish every single one of you a happy, healthy, long life. But my wife came up to me the other day and said, in her beautifully innocent way, she showed me a picture of some meme. This woman was like supposedly 300 years old. Now I happen to know that the oldest person ever was 122. So, and she said, "Don't let me get this old, because I'll be a burden to this." And I understand that sentiment. And I jokingly have been teasing her, "You never gave me a minimum age." And that's just their little joke. I'd never heard her in a million years. But a lot of people feel like that. I watch a few people's health degenerate. My grandfather was a heavy smoker. When I mean heavy, I mean minimum 2 packs a day, probably more. I didn't go with him when he did his cigarette runs. But you know what got him? Parkinson's. Yeah, that's not on the warning list for tobacco, and they're not related. Not at all. I found out from my doctor that there's no genetic family tendency towards passing it along, which helps me a lot because my hands shake like crazy. But that's probably due to another set of circumstances that we don't need to go into. And I remember they had him intubated and were feeding him through the stomach. And he was, but at that point we didn't know what was happening. He was definitely suffering, but the same token, he was being kept care of the best it was. And I remember, with his voice, barely anything, he asked if he could have a bowl of rice. Now this is my grandfather's final request. But unfortunately, once they hook you up to the tube, they can't feed you through your mouth. So he never got that rice. It's a bit of a shame, but at the same token, we don't want him choking on rice while we're trying to keep him alive. Personally, I'd like for me to be able to decide what happens. Whether that's possible or not, don't know. But I'd like to give myself a fighting chance. Who knows? The human body is a miracle. It can repair itself from crazy things. They give up on people. They're in a coma for 20 years. The person gets up. They're walking. They're talking. They don't know who these old people are, but they survive some crazy crap. And ultimately, everybody's life doesn't end in a fantasy, except for a fantasy of rice. And I imagine, given the number of people that eat rice on this planet, now the funny part is my grandfather, I can't remember him ever eating rice. He was a steak and potatoes kind of guy. Back when you could eat steak and potatoes and it was affordable. Different era, different kind of. He was the greatest generation. He did service during World War II. And, well, both my grandfathers did. We have to recognize that how we cope with unlife is important to how we deal with life. Now, yesterday I went through some arguably unhealthy choices of projecting how you feel onto the rest of the world, but it's something each of us have to deal with. We're going to face the Reaper sooner or later. You can't outrun him, but you can make the bastard work for it. I love that expression. I'm sorry. And that's my intention. There's all these stories about getting, if you get the Grim Reaper to play a game with you and you win, then you get to keep your life. But I imagine the Grim Reaper has gotten really good at every single game on the planet. So, it's like the devil went down to Georgia and, the local kid beats him for the fiddle made of gold. Yeah. And I'm thinking, when the Reaper comes, would it make any sense for him to show up in some sort of a hood and cape and, with the big sky? That's the way he's depicted. But no. If your job is to convince people to come with you, you don't want to scare the shit out of them and ask them to come with you. That's not an efficient way to do business. You probably come down as an attractive person, maybe somebody in a business suit, maybe a very professional looking. I don't think you want to do nurse. You probably want to go like an airline attendant or something like that. Some new people who can look at and know and trust. Policemen, that freaks some people out. That might not be a good idea, but it's purely personal. Whatever you find would be appealing, and that's my opinion. Because, like I said, it doesn't help to have a big, scary, sky-slinging guy trying to dispatch you to the hereafter. But, somebody maybe you recognize, somebody maybe you can sympathize with, that would make sense. And that's the only speculation I'm going to make about the hereafter. Because other than that, I don't know anything. Heck, I didn't know anything when I started this either, aside from some biological facts. But that's the way the story goes. Do not be afraid, because fear will do you no good. It's inevitable. Don't become complacent. There's some people who are self-destructive, and if they hear that, they may think, oh, joy, that's better than the life I'm living now. No. But what you should be is contemplative. We are the symbolic animal. We are able to communicate using symbols and thought and references, and that's something we should never, ever forget. We have a duty to think about these things, and the purpose of this is simply to give you things to think about, because that's what the Silverlight Show is here for. With that, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please like, share, because sharing is caring. Don't forget to click the subscribe button in case you haven't subscribed already. Please click the notification bell down below, because that way you'll be notified every time we come up with a new episode. And we hope you have a fantastic day.